Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. In today's episode, we have the first MLB social media power rankings for the upcoming season. Where are the Philadelphia Phillies and are they in the right spot? We'll debate that. Plus, an update on the center field position. It's the biggest competition battle between position players in camp right now for the Philadelphia Phillies. And we're 8 days away from opening day. Who's the best number 8 in Phillies history? Debatable pick, but we'll get into it on today's episode of Locked On Phillies.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm Connor Thomas, your host. Thank you so much for checking us out. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. So we have the official first power rankings of the 2024 season. Now, if you're not aware, by the way, the 2024 regular season started today. In South Korea, the Dodgers beat the Padres for their first win of the season, the Padres' first loss. So it was opening day for those two teams. Yes, regular season baseball already as part of the Seoul series. So these rankings came out a day ago, but they are the official MLB rankings for teams. And the Philadelphia Phillies, they're in the top 10. I only have the top 10 teams here, but they're in the top 10. They're in the top 5. The Philadelphia Phillies are 4th in the power rankings. So first, let's talk about if that's the right spot to have the Phillies. I think they deserve to be a top 5 team in baseball. I really do. And the reason why is because they're a super balanced, super talented team. The rotation is really, really good. The bullpen is really, really good. The lineup is spectacular. And the defense is much improved. There's not really a spot where the Philadelphia Phillies look weak, which is why I've been battling with the fan base all offseason long, it feels like. Not everybody in the fan base, but there's been a contingency of Phillies fans that are like, this team has not done enough. Well, they're a top 5 team in baseball, according to the power rankings and according to the eye test. I would say giving yourself a top 5 team in baseball is probably a pretty good place to say the offseason was successful. But that's it, right? They're the most successful National League team in the postseason over the past 2 years. They're tied for the most successful team in all of baseball in the postseason the past 2 years with the Houston Astros. I mean, this team is they're stacked. There's no other way to put it. The Philadelphia Phillies are absolutely stacked. Now, being in good shape in the power rankings does not mean you're guaranteed to be in good shape when you actually touch dirt and grass for the first time and play regular season baseball. Let's look at who's around the Philadelphia Phillies, and it'll show you why 4th is good, but there's still some trouble out there. So let's start from 10. Very interesting rankings here. 10 is the Arizona Diamondbacks. And let's say, wow, that team won the NL pennant last year, went to the World Series. We all kind of knew they weren't quite there talent-wise. They were playing unbelievably in the postseason last year. They deserved to make it. They won their way there. They earned it. But looking at that team, everybody was saying, wow, what a run these guys are on. How are they doing it with the roster that they have? 10, I think, is not a bad spot to put the Diamondbacks. Respectable that they're in the top 10. People might say that's a drop-off because of how successful they were in the postseason last year, but I think that's fair ranking. 9 is the Tampa Bay Rays. The Rays are always a quality team. They always find ways to put it together. I'd be surprised if they had another outstanding season because of some of the guys they lost during last season and this past offseason. I don't know if they're a top 10 team in baseball, but their track record gives you enough faith that they could be. Another one that I think is kind of interesting, the Toronto Blue Jays at 8. The Blue Jays are interesting. They're one of their biggest offseason acquisitions was Daniel Vogelbach. And I mean, I like him for what he is, but it's just if that's how you're spending your offseason, they would have been much higher if the Shohei Ohtani reports that said he was going to Toronto were actually true. But Blue Jays at 8, tough division there in the AL East. You got the Blue Jays, you got the Rays there at 8 and 9. Then another AL East team at 7, the New York Yankees. I imagine they would have been higher if Garrett Cole was healthy, but that injury that Garrett Cole is facing puts them a little bit further down. The Astros at 6, they're on the downslope. They're starting to slow down a little bit when it comes to their dominance out in the American League, but them at 6, okay, I can see that. Here's an interesting one that people are going to be mad at, specifically people in the Lone Star State. The Texas Rangers, your defending World Series champions, at 5. I'll tell you what, I think they're a really good team. I think they're a top 5 team in baseball, but 5 doesn't feel disrespectful to me because there are some other teams with some really, really talented rosters that seem to have the rightful spot ahead of them. The Phillies at 4, right above the World Series from last year Rangers. That tells you all you need to know. Are the Phillies good enough to win the World Series this year? They're ranked above the team that won it last year. That doesn't mean they're guaranteed anything. It means that Dave Dombrowski, Sam Fuld, John Middleton, the contingency of the people who paid for and made the decisions this offseason, have done enough to put the Phillies in a place where they can compete to win a World Series. So yes, the Phillies are good enough. Who are the 3 teams above? Well, third in the power rankings are the Baltimore Orioles. And I really like Baltimore, especially the Corbin Burns move. We talked previously about if the Phillies should have done that, but I think they've got a great contingency of young players. They are a really talented young team, and the Corbin Burns acquisition makes them even more ready. I do think there might be a regression year coming for them because they played so well last year, a 100-win team, top seed in the American League. Like, that was a team that was special last year in the regular season, at least not great in the postseason. We'll see if they stick at 3. And then you can figure out the top 2 teams in baseball. The question is, who's number 1? Well, 2 is the Los Angeles Dodgers. The addition of Shohei Ohtani, at least in hitting capacity, the addition of Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Tyler Glasnow, so many others that are now members of the Los Angeles Dodgers. That team could easily take over the top spot in the power rankings, but the top spot belongs to the Atlanta Braves, who were the best regular season team last year, a juggernaut. They can't find a way to beat the Philadelphia Phillies. That's why it's kind of worrisome that the Phillies are 4, because 4 is a great spot to be, a top 4 team in baseball. I'm not going to complain about that. But when the top 2 teams in baseball are both from your league, and one is from your specific division, and that's the number 1 team in baseball according to these power rankings, it's harder to get excited about being the 4th best team in baseball if it means you might be the 3rd highest seed in your league, or not even 3rd highest. If you don't beat Atlanta, you're going to be a wild card team. So drop you to the 4th highest seed in the postseason. It's going to be tough to compete with Atlanta and LA, just overall record-wise. Could the Phillies do it? Well, they're not far off of these teams. They might not have the pop star power, that this team is going to be a juggernaut, but the Phillies are almost like a sneaky juggernaut. Teams know they're talented. Fan bases know the Phillies are talented, but I don't think that people realize how good this team could be if they put it all together. And you get great Bryce Harper, great Trey Turner, a great Aaron Nola year. You're supposed to get, if you believe the up, down years for Nola, you're supposed to have a better year this time. Wheeler got paid. Ranger Suarez has looked really good in spring training. This team could be something very, very special. I've said it before. I'll say it again. And I'm going to go through a segment later on when we get closer to opening day. Might put it out over the weekend or early next week, where I give you my predictions for some big Phillies numbers, win total, spot in the division, all of these things where we're going to go through that. But I'll tell you now, I believe the Phillies are going to be closer to 100 wins than they are to 90 wins. That means 96 or above wins for the Philadelphia Phillies. I think that's a realistic expectation for this team, and that's why they're number 4 in the power rankings. So MLB, great job. I think you got most of it right. I think the Orioles might be a little high. I think the Rangers might be a little low, and I think the Blue Jays and Rays are potentially going to end up outside the top 10 when everything's all said and done. But the Phillies are in a good spot. The baseball folks like them, at least the folks that run the MLB accounts and put together those power rankings. So a good start to the season as far as perspective for the Phillies, but it doesn't matter if you go out and have another slow start. And you need to have the right guys in place. Coming up next, We're going to talk about a conversation that maybe the right guys in place are not the guys we originally thought, especially in the outfield. What's going on with center field? You guys aren't going to like my explanation, but this is the explanation you need to hear. So I'm going to tell you my latest thoughts on the center field position, Johan Rojas, Christian Pache, everybody. We'll get into that as we continue Locked On Phillies. Let me tell you about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. I mean, it's just you against the numbers. You don't battle thousands of other players. You don't play against pro gamblers. You don't play against like gambling sharks. They're just there to try to take advantage. No, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings pile up. It's super easy to do. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with NBA, NHL, and college basketball entries today on Prize Picks. They're America's #1 fantasy sports app. And Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. If you're on the East Coast, guess what? The Sixers have a late night game. They're out in Phoenix playing the Suns. Tyrese Maxey's looked really good. He looked great in their last game out. I'd take his over in points. And then Kevin Durant probably doesn't have someone with the Sixers that can defend him all that well. I'd take the over in Kevin Durant points as well. That's what I'd do with Prize Picks. I'd go ahead and check that out and see if you can get a winner that way. So here's what I want you to do. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the Prize Picks app today. You put in code LOCKEDONMLB, you'll get a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's just that easy. Let's get into this conversation about center field because this is the #1 question of the offseason of spring training. It's the #1 question I get asked by people. I talk about this almost ad nauseum, not even on the podcast, just in conversation with friends and people I run into. So I know a lot of people are out there wondering, well, Rojas hasn't played well. He hasn't put together good at-bats in spring training. Who's the starting center fielder? Is it Christian Pache? Is it Whit Merrifield? Is Jake Cave going to make this roster? What in the world is going on with the Philadelphia Phillies center field position? Here's what I'll tell you. This is my grasp of the situation. I'm not guaranteeing this is correct. This is how I've read this from Jump Street, from things that I've heard reported, from things that I've heard not reported. I'm not breaking any news here. No, I'm just trying to put together puzzle pieces of rumors and reports. But the way I've looked at this situation from about a month ago, so after spring training started, but you're looking at a situation where always it helps the Philadelphia Phillies the most if Rojas is able to play center field, because that allows Whit Merrifield to be a depth option instead of having to play more. It allows you to potentially not have Jake Cave on the roster in favor of a Christian Pache, or even if he is on the roster, he's like the last guy on. He won't have to do as much. The lefty bat's still intriguing, but it gives you more optionality. And that's good for a major league team because things are going to change. You need guys that you can use as depth pieces, and Rojas in center field means you have some versatile players you could add to the opening day roster that make things easier for Rob Thompson to manage. So quite simply, best case scenario for the Phillies is that Johan Rojas is the starting center fielder. And it seems that they believe he's put in work this offseason to lead to him deserving the job. He's still got to show stuff in spring training. Like, he can't go out and just be absolutely terrible. And he has not been good. But my sense is that the Philadelphia Phillies are already they've wanted Rojas to be the center fielder. That kind of is the expectation. I'll put it that way. They expect him to be the opening day center fielder. There would have to be major concerns about Rojas, his ability to hit ever, if he's going to not make this roster. And here's why I say that. Look at the lineup. Look at the players you have available. You have Schwarber, Harper, Castellanos, Realmuto, Bohm, Stott, Marsh. Turner, I forget Trey Turner. Like, you have so many guys that are just really, really next level players, next level hitters. There is not a below average, right? We're talking below average. There are plenty of average MLB hitters out there in really good lineups. I think there's an argument to be made that every single hitter on the Philadelphia Phillies, starting lineup wise, is an above average major league bat. Some are transcendent. Harper, Turner, sometimes Schwarber, depending on how much you value the long ball. Castellanos can be in stretches. Romito can be in stretches. Like, they have a star-studded lineup. I look at it this way, right? Rojas does not have to hit. Is it better for the Phillies if he does? Absolutely. But if he doesn't, is that enough to make your team harder to put together because you have less flexibility if Rojas is not up with the major league team? You have significantly worse defense. I know Christian Pache is a good defender. He's not Rojas. He's not. I know Marsh is a good defender. He's not Rojas. There's a chance that Rojas is the legitimate best outfielder in baseball this year if he plays enough at the major league level. And that is too tantalizing of an opportunity to give up. Plus defense with this rotation in this ballpark. I mean, you need to be able to cover center field out there at Citizens Bank Park, and honestly everywhere in baseball. But he's too valuable of a piece on one side of the ball. Basically, look at it this way, right? We're going to use a basketball analogy. Imagine that you had, who's a great offensive player that doesn't play defense? James Harden. Perfect. Imagine you had a team of 4 James Hardens, and then the 5th player on that team was the best defensive player in basketball. Would you be complaining that that player can't score? Or would you say, no, we've got scoring covered. We need defense. That's kind of what this Rojas thing is. He could really be abysmal at the plate, and he's still probably worth it to be on the team. And if he doesn't work out, right? Let's say you give him the center field spot and he just doesn't hit and the Phillies win anyway, or whatever happens. You can still make a move at the trade deadline to go get a center fielder. Like, you're not locked in if he's on the opening day roster and you make him the everyday center fielder for a month, 2 months, 3 months. You're not locked into doing that in the postseason. And if this team does not make the postseason because of Johan Rojas not hitting, it won't be Rojas's fault. It'll be on all the star power that you have that's supposed to carry this team. So that's why I think Rojas is still your everyday starting center fielder. The Pache Cave thing, it's super weird. It's honestly a toss-up. Neither of them have options left. So if they don't make the team, they're going to have to either clear waivers, or they're going to be picked up by another team, or they're going to be outright released. It's going to be really interesting to see which of those two make the team. I would prefer Pache, but I'm biased because Jake Cave left a sour taste in my mouth after the 2023 season. It just didn't – he wasn't good. And I know he's a lefty bat, so if they want to use that as a reason to put him on the team, we'll have to accept that. That's much more of a coin flip situation. And I really think some people might see the starting center fielder situation as a coin flip. Reading the tea leaves, it seems like the Phillies are going to force Rojas into that spot. And if he plays up to it, great. If he doesn't, the hope is the team will be good enough to carry him and work around the deficiencies he has at the plate. And if that's still too much at the trade deadline, you'll make a move. Or if it's still too much a month or two into the season, just send him down. But I think Rojas is still the starting center fielder of this team. That's how I've really always felt. And honestly, I think the Phillies are just hell-bent on making that reality. So that's what I'm looking at right now. And you can let me know in the comments if I'm missing something, but that's my read on the situation. Coming up on Friday, you're going to get my final prediction for the opening day 26-man roster. So I'll lock in names and I'll let you know what I think. And we'll see if things play out the way I would like them to play out, or I expect them to play out. But I think Rojas is going to be the starting center fielder for this team. Coming up next, we're going to go through the top players to wear number 8 for the Philadelphia Phillies as we're 8 days away from opening day. We got that coming up as we wrap up Locked On Phillies. Let me tell you about Game Time first, though, because you shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. I mean, we got opening day coming up. You want to get tickets to go watch the Phils? I mean, Game Time's the place to do it. If you think you wake up Thursday morning, March 28th, and you're like, man, I forgot to get opening day tickets, go to Game Time. They got great last minute tickets for sports, theater, comedy, music, all kinds of stuff. They got killer last minute deals. They got so many cool features, right? You can see the view from your seat before you buy the tickets. You can see the total cost of the tickets before you go to the final screen. The Game Time guarantee means if you find a seat in the same row and section for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Honestly, there's no reason why you shouldn't be using Game Time already. But you take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time, and I'll give you another reason. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On. You'll get $20 off your first purchase. So if that's opening day tickets, congrats. Locked On Phillies just got you $20 off your opening day tickets. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On. You'll get $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. The best number 8 in Phillies history. Who could it be? Is it recent? Is it older? Well, I got to say this. I know some old heads are going to get mad at me over this, and that's fine. Listen, when I'm 50, 60, 70, if I make it to that age, God willing, I'm going to be upset that people are not like naming Chase Utley as the best player. Jimmy Rollins is the best player at a certain number, stuff like that. So I get it. I'm not saying you're wrong or you're crazy. This is my opinion on the list, and you reserve the right to disagree with it. There are a lot of really interesting number 8s out there in Phillies history, though. We got a pretty darn good one right now with Nick Castellanos. He's already made an all-star team. Now, the Phillies probably won't keep him long enough for him to be the best number 8 in Phillies history, but he's a pretty darn impactful one. There's some other great names down here. Jim Eisenreich, good one. Bob Boone. You're looking at, there's recently Freddie Galvis, Phil Gosselin, Logan Morrison. There's some names on this list that make you look and say, okay, there have been some good number 8s. Chuck Klein in Philadelphia Phillies history. But, I value guys that were on championship rosters. And, I may be slightly biased to guys that I watched played. It's easier to evaluate guys I saw. And this dude's just all-time really fan favorite player. We still love him here in Philadelphia. He's beloved everywhere he played. Rule 5 draft pick by the Philadelphia Phillies, and one of the best decisions they've made in franchise history. Shane Victorino. He wore the number 8 from 2005 to 2012. He wore it as part of that 2008 championship team. Great defensively, great offensively, huge moments. We remember the grand slam off of CC Sabathia. Like, moments you'll never forget if you watch Shane Victorino growing up or as part of this generation or even part of the older generation. Who can get mad at the Flying Hawaiian? So if you don't like the Flying Hawaiian pick, come on, guys. That's not a bad pick for best number 8 in Philadelphia Phillies history. I know there's probably some guys back in the day that you'd want to contend with, and that's totally fine. There have been other great players, but I'm going with Shane Victorino. I think he deserves that spot, in my opinion. And I hope that Nick Castellanos plays here 4, 5, 6 more years and is an all-star in 3 of them and ends up putting his name in the discussion. That would require a ring, which means the Phillies better run into a World Series soon. Bottom line is Shane Victorino is the best Philly to wear number 8, in my opinion. And we'll go to number 7 tomorrow. But that's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Thank you so much for checking us out. Again, I really appreciate it. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I know I've been teasing it. I've had a lot of stuff going on this week, but Mailbag Thursday, we're going to do tomorrow. Friday, obviously, it'll be my final roster prediction. So I want to do Mailbag Thursday tomorrow. I'll put out the tweet with questions. And I know I just probably answered a lot of people's question about center field, whether you like the answer or not. But if you have other questions ahead of opening day, we'll get into that on tomorrow's episode. And you can respond to the tweet at ConnorThomas975 on Twitter. If you didn't catch that, my handle's right here on the YouTube. But again, at ConnorThomas975 on Twitter. But that's all for today's episode. Thank you again for tuning in. And I'll talk to you tomorrow on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.